I woke from a 3-month coma to a note saying, "Good luck." But my father's abandonment triggered a will that gave me everything Reddit stories. The moment I opened my eyes, I learned my family had walked away, and accidentally handed me the empire they tried to erase me from. But as the truth surfaced, the power shift exposed cracks in our legacy no one was prepared to face. Hi, I'm Noah Crestwood, 27, and the first thing I saw when I opened my eyes after a 3-month coma was an empty hospital room and a note from my father taped to the wall like a sick joke. "We stopped paying. Good luck." That was it. No. "Glad you're alive." No. "Call us." No siblings. No flowers. Just a signature that looked like he'd scribbled it while rushing to catch a golf tee time. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. Honestly, I felt nothing. When you grow up in a family like mine, abandonment doesn't sting, it just confirms the forecast. Before the accident, before the coma, before that moment of waking in a dim room with a dry throat and a buzzing machine, I was the black sheep of the Crestwoods. The disappointment. The wasted potential. The son who didn't want to take over the empire. My father, Charles Crestwood, self-appointed titan of industry and world-class narcissist, never let me forget it. My siblings, Julia and Ethan, were carbon copies of him. Perfect smiles, perfect grades, perfect obedience. I was the one who chose art school over finance. Music over mergers. Independence over being a puppet. Dad hated that. But I never imagined he'd hate me enough to vanish the moment I needed him most. A nurse walked in just as I peeled the note off the wall. "Oh, you're awake!" she gasped. "We tried contacting your family, but they're not coming," I said, voice rough. "They made that clear." She winced. "I'm so sorry." I wasn't. Not yet. I was too tired to be angry. And then the door swung open again. My lawyer, Stephen Grayson, walked in with a man in an immaculate black suit who looked like he'd walked straight out of a courtroom drama. "Noah," Stephen said, relief washing over his face. "Good to have you back." The man beside him smiled, not warm, not comforting. Sharp. Intent. A grin that knew things. "Noah," he said, extending a hand. "I'm Malcolm Reeves. Your father made a very big mistake." I blinked at him. "Which one?" I croaked. Malcolm's grin widened. "He forgot who you really are." Before I could ask what that meant, Stephen pulled out a thick folder, the kind that only appears when someone's life is about to be rewritten. Malcolm clasped his hands behind his back. "You weren't supposed to see that note," he said. "And your father wasn't supposed to leave you here." He stepped closer. "Because if he'd remembered the terms of your grandfather's will, he would have known abandoning you triggers everything." My heart thudded once. Hard. Stephen nodded. "Noah, you're now the primary heir." For the first time since waking up, I felt something. Not grief. Not fear. A slow, rising heat in my chest. Because my father had tried to cut me off. But instead, he just handed me everything he'd spent 40 years building. And I wasn't sure whether to laugh or burn the world down. Waking from a coma is disorienting enough, but waking up to learn you've accidentally become the most powerful Crestwood alive. That'll jolt your brain faster than any 4-drip. I blinked at Malcolm, then at Stephen, then at the folder like it might start glowing. "I'm sorry," I rasped. "Heir to what, exactly? My father's disappointment? The family group chat I was kicked out of." Malcolm chuckled, the kind of low, dangerous sound lawyers make right before revealing plot-altering paperwork. "Noah," he said, tapping the folder. "Your grandfather, your real grandfather, not the sanitized version your father liked to parade around, included a clause in his estate. A clause Charles conveniently forgot to mention." Stephen opened the folder. Inside were signatures, seals, and enough legal weight to flatten a truck. Malcolm continued, pacing like he was unveiling a twist on stage. "Your grandfather built the foundation of the Crestwood Empire. Not your father. And he knew Charles was, well, Charles. Power-hungry. Image-obsessed. Cruel. I snorted. You're being polite. Malcolm grinned. We bill by the hour. Politeness is part of the rate. Stephen slid a packet toward me. Noah, the will states, if Charles ever fails to provide reasonable care to any one of his children during a medical crisis, that child becomes the controlling beneficiary of the trust. I stared. Malcolm raised a brow. Leaving you in a hospital with a post-it note saying good luck qualifies as failure to provide reasonable care. Reasonable care. My father didn't even provide reasonable humanity. So, I said slowly, you're telling me that by abandoning me, he handed me the entire Crestwood Trust? Stephen nodded. And controlling interest in the company. And the properties tied to the family holdings. And the voting rights. My pulse thumped in my ears. I wasn't just the heir. I was now the boss of everything my father worshipped. Malcolm clasped his hands. Your father is already panicking. When we informed him you'd regained control, he... Wait, I cut in. He knows. Oh, he knows, Malcolm said, eyes gleaming. He tried to contest it. Unsuccessfully. The clause is ironclad. Stephen added, he believes you'll overturn it or give it back. He believes you're still the same son he could push around. A laugh escaped me, hoarse, humorless, sharp. Months in a coma, abandoned, written off like trash, and now he expected gratitude? Malcolm leaned closer. So, Noah, here's the question. He paused, letting the weight settle into the air. What do you want to do with all of it? For the first time since childhood, I held the power. Not Charles. Not my siblings. Me. And as the machines beeped quietly around me, a thought bloomed, dark, tempting, honest. My father didn't just forget who I was. He never bothered to know in the first place. But now, he was about to learn. The day I left the hospital, the world felt too bright and too loud. My legs were weak, my mind foggy, but under all that was something new, something sharp. Power. Stephen wheeled me to the curb where Malcolm waited beside a black sedan that looked expensive enough to have its own security detail. He opened the door for me like I was royalty. It felt strange. I'd spent my entire life as the family afterthought. Now people were opening doors. As soon as we pulled onto the main road, Malcolm handed me a tablet. Your father has been calling nonstop, he said. 37 times since sunrise. I raised a brow. Worried about me? Malcolm laughed. Worried about losing control. He tapped the screen. A video call interface popped up, frozen mid-rage on my father's face. Play it, I said. The message burst to life. Noah! What is this nonsense? Malcolm is overstepping. You do not have authority, your siblings and I will resolve this. Call me immediately. Next message. This is a misunderstanding. The clause was never intended to apply to situations like this. Another. You're being manipulated. Don't embarrass yourself. And then, the final one, voice raw, frantic. Noah. Stop this. You're not capable of running anything. Don't make me fix your mess again. There it was. The truth flashing through his mask. I wasn't his son. I was a problem he wanted to erase. I handed the tablet back. Delete all of them. Malcolm nodded. With pleasure. We drove straight to the Crestwood Corporate Tower, a monument to Charles's ego, all gleaming glass and sharp angles. As we pulled up, security guards who once barely acknowledged me now straightened like I was the one signing their paychecks. Stephen helped me out of the car. You don't have to do this today, he murmured. You just woke up. No, I said. I need to. We entered the lobby. And standing there, waiting like he owned oxygen itself, was my father. Charles Crestwood. Tailored suit. Perfect posture. Eyes like polished steel. He looked at me not with relief, but with fury. Noah, he said through fists clenched at his sides. What do you think you're doing? I held his gaze. Walking. You can barely stand, he snapped. And yet here I am, I said. Alive. Despite you? A ripple went through the lobby. People were listening. His jaw twitched. We'll talk privately. No, I said. We won't. For the first time in my life, he blinked, confused, taken aback, recalculating. You think a technicality gives you the right? It's not a technicality. Malcolm cut in smoothly. It's the law. And the documents are already filed. My father rounded on him, face red. I hired you. You did, Malcolm said, unbothered. But now I work for him. He nodded toward me. My father swallowed hard. Then he whispered the most honest sentence he'd ever spoken. You're not strong enough to do this. Maybe he meant physically. Maybe emotionally. Maybe both. But something inside me, something I thought the coma had drained away, ignited. I stepped closer, close enough that I could see the tiny crack in his polished facade. You left me to die, I said quietly. And now you're afraid I lived. His eyes widened. That was it. The turning point. The exact moment the power shifted. He wasn't the Titan anymore. I was. And everyone in that lobby felt it. This was the moment the entire Crestwood legacy split cleanly in two. Before Noah. And after Noah. My father wasn't used to being challenged, especially not in public, so watching him struggle for composure was like watching a wolf try to remember how to act domesticated. He inhaled slowly, smoothing his tie, forcing his voice back into something resembling control. Noah, he said, let's speak in my office. Now. He said it like a command. Like I was still the kid he could snap his fingers at. I didn't move. I'm not going anywhere with you. His eyes narrowed. You're making a spectacle. No, I said. You did that when you abandoned your son in a hospital bed and left a note like you were canceling a gym membership. Gasps rippled around us. Phones subtly tilted. People pretended not to listen but absolutely were. He jerked his head toward the security guards. Clear the lobby. No one's leaving, Malcolm said, stepping forward before my father could push deeper into authoritarian panic. There's nothing confidential happening here. Just a shareholder exercising his legal rights. My father's jaw locked. You're enjoying this. Malcolm smiled. Immensely. Charles's gaze darted between the three of us, calculating, furious. For the first time, he didn't know how to win. You want to humiliate me, he said quietly. Is that it? No, I replied. Humiliation implies I'm exaggerating. I'm simply stating facts. He stiffened. You're acting like a child. You left me in a hospital, I said. Children don't do that. Monsters do. The lobby went dead silent. My father opened his mouth, then closed it. He turned sharply and strode toward the elevators, refusing to let anyone see his expression. His entourage, my siblings included, waited on the mezzanine level like obedient shadows. Julia and Ethan descended the stairs the moment they saw me. Julia's heels clicked a frantic warning. Noah, she hissed. What are you doing? Enforcing the law, I said. Ethan scoffed. You can't run Crestwood. You can't even run your own life. Ah. There it was. The family anthem. Dad told us you were confused. Julia added gently, as if soothing a child. He said Malcolm took advantage of you while you were compromised. I stared at her. You mean while I was unconscious? After Dad abandoned me? Her smile slipped. Stephen stepped in, placing a hand on my shoulder. Noah, maybe we should. No, I said. They need to hear this. I turned to my siblings. Dad forgot the will clause. He forgot the law. He forgot basic humanity. But most importantly, I stepped closer. He forgot who I grew up to be. And you too? You helped him forget. Julia's eyes softened, but not in a way that showed empathy, only reluctance. Noah, come on. You don't want to do this. I already did. Malcolm pulled out a binder and handed Ethan a folder. In less than 2 hours, he announced, the board will convene to formally transfer controlling interest. Noah will chair the meeting. Ethan flipped through the papers, face whitening with every page. You can't, Dad will fight it. He already tried, Malcolm said. And lost. Julia turned slowly toward me. Noah, do you really want to take everything? I looked her dead in the eyes. I'm not taking anything. It was always supposed to be mine if Dad failed us. And he failed. Malcolm added cheerfully. Spectacularly. My siblings exchanged a glance, panic, disbelief, fear of losing the lifestyle they'd grown fat on. You're destroying the family. Julia whispered. No, I said. I'm ending the part of it that destroyed me. Stephen nodded. Well said. Before any of them could respond, a voice echoed through the lobby. Noah. The elevator doors slid open. And there stood someone I never expected to see. My grandfather's oldest friend. The man who knew every version of our family. He stepped forward, cane tapping marble, eyes sharp despite his age. And he said, It's time the real Crestwood stands up. Everyone froze. The man walking toward us wasn't just anyone. He was Victor Hale, my grandfather's business partner, and the only person my father ever seemed afraid of. He was old now, hair silver, moving slowly, but his presence hit the lobby like a shockwave. My father stepped out of the elevator behind him, face tight with suppressed panic. Victor, he said quickly, you shouldn't be here. This is a private matter. Victor didn't even look at him. Charles, if this were private, you wouldn't have left your son to die in a hospital bed. The entire lobby murmured. My father's face strained of color. I didn't. This is being blown out of proportion. Victor raised a hand. Stop talking. Every word you've said so far makes you smaller. Julia and Ethan stepped aside as Victor approached me. He studied my face for a long moment, long enough that I wondered what he was searching for. Then he smiled, faint but certain. You look like your grandfather, he said. He had that same look in his eyes whenever he'd decided enough was enough. I felt something tighten in my chest. A connection I'd never been allowed to have. Victor turned to Malcolm. Has he seen the full portfolio? Not yet, Malcolm said. We were waiting for you. Victor nodded. I made a promise to his grandfather that I'd be here when the time came. The time. Those words hit like a heartbeat. My father stepped forward, voice cracking under pressure he couldn't hide anymore. Victor, you're misunderstanding everything. Noah is unstable. He's barely recovered. He's in no position to. Victor pivoted, eyes sharp as glass. Charles, I warned you 30 years ago. If you ever put your ego above your children, you'd lose everything. My father's mouth snapped shut. Victor continued. You thought Noah was weak because he didn't want your life. Because he didn't chase power or titles. But your father understood something you didn't. Strength isn't loud. It isn't cruel. It isn't domination. He pointed at me. Strength is surviving everything you tried to break. My throat tightened. Dad looked at me like he was seeing a stranger, and maybe he was. No, Victor said. Let's finish what your grandfather started. Malcolm handed me a fresh packet, a different one this time. Thicker. Heavier. Victor walked me to the center of the lobby. Everyone watched. This, he said loudly enough for my father to hear, is the document your grandfather drafted when Noah was 10. He knew one day you'd turn on your own blood. He knew one day Noah would need protection from you. He leaned closer, voice lowering. And he knew Noah would rise. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the packet, but not from fear. From clarity. From power. Victor rested a hand on my shoulder. Noah, he said, it's time to claim what was always meant for you. Behind him, my father whispered, voice cracking. Noah, don't do this. But I already knew. He wasn't begging for me. He was begging for himself. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one trapped. He was. Victor guided me toward the towering glass doors that led to the boardroom floor, doors I'd walked past 100 times as a kid, always told. That's for real Crestwoods. And now here I was, about to walk through them as the only Crestwood that actually mattered. Security stepped aside without a word. The elevator ride was silent except for the hum of machinery and my father's shallow breathing behind me. He stood in the corner, fists clenched, shoulders tight, trying to summon whatever authority he thought he still had. When the doors opened, the entire board was already seated, an ocean of suits and power ties. Some faces I recognized from company events. Others were strangers. But all of them turned as I entered. Not at my father. Not at Julia or Ethan. At me. Malcolm stepped forward. As of 8:01 this morning, he said crisply, per the activation of the Crestwood contingency clause, Noah Crestwood is now the majority beneficiary and controlling vote of the Crestwood Trust. A wave of whispers swept across the table. My father surged forward. This is absurd. He's been unconscious for months. He's not capable of leading anything. Victor's cane struck the floor so sharply the room stopped breathing. Charles, he said, sit down. It wasn't a suggestion. My father hesitated, then obeyed. I don't think anyone had seen him sit when told since the 80s. I took the seat at the head of the table. My father's seat. The symbolic throne he'd spent his entire life polishing. It felt surreal. Cold. Clean. Unavoidable. Malcolm placed another document in front of me. This is the formal transfer of operational authority. Once you sign this, you are the acting head of Crestwood Holdings. My father shot to his feet again. No! Noah, listen to me, this isn't you. You don't want this. You've never wanted this. I looked up at him, finally seeing him clearly. A man terrified not of losing a son, but of losing ownership. You're right, I said calmly. I never wanted your empire. He blinked, hope flickering. But I'm done letting you use it to hurt people. The hope vanished. I picked up the pen. Julia whispered, Noah, please don't do this. You're changing everything. I didn't look at her. Because the truth was simple. Everything was already broken. I'm just stopping the bleeding. And then I signed. A clean stroke. A single breath. The sound of a dynasty snapping out of my father's hands. He staggered back into his chair like the ground had tilted. Victor smiled, sad, proud, certain. It's done, Malcolm announced. The room erupted in motion, papers shuffling, board members talking, the legal machinery of a corporation shifting its entire axis. But all I saw was my father. For the first time in my life, he looked small. Not because I'd beaten him, but because he'd finally run out of people to stand on. He whispered, barely audible. You'll regret this. I leaned forward. No, I said. You will. Because I hadn't taken the company to punish him. I'd taken it to protect myself, and everyone who came after me, from ever being at his mercy again. And this was only the beginning. The boardroom emptied slowly, like people were afraid sudden movement might set off an explosion. My father remained seated, staring at the polished table as if it might reveal an escape route. But I wasn't looking at him anymore. I was looking at the future. Victor rested both hands on his cane. Noah, walk with me. We stepped out into the hallway, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city my father once dominated. Now it felt different. Lighter. Mine, but not in the way he saw ownership. Not conquest. Responsibility. You're handling this better than I expected, Victor said. I snorted. I'm handling it better than I expected. He smiled. Your grandfather trusted that you would. He knew your father would try to bend the world to his ego. And he knew ego breaks faster than integrity. We reached a quiet alcove. I leaned against the glass, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders inch by inch. Victor, what was my grandfather really like? I barely remember him. Victor didn't hesitate. He was nothing like your father. He loved this company because it helped people, employees, communities, families. Charles turned it into a throne. You can turn it back into a foundation. That struck deep. Because I suddenly realized I didn't have to become a tyrant to replace one. I could rebuild everything differently. Before I could speak, footsteps echoed behind us. Julia and Ethan. Julia looked shaken. Ethan looked furious. Noah, Julia said softly. We need to talk. Victor nodded and stepped aside but didn't leave. Ethan crossed his arms. Dad was right. You're letting outsiders manipulate you. You can't run this place. You don't have the spine. I raised a brow. You just watched me take control of the entire company while standing upright on legs that barely work. Ethan faltered. Julia stepped between us. We're not here to fight. We just don't want you to shut us out. You're our brother. I studied her face, searching for sincerity instead of strategy. She swallowed. We didn't know Dad left you like that. We thought, he told us, you were unstable, confused. That you didn't want us involved. A cold clarity hit me. My father hadn't just abandoned me. He'd lied to them about it. I clenched my jaw. Did he show you the note? Julia frowned. What note? Ethan shifted uncomfortably. He'd clearly seen it. I pulled out my phone, opened the photo of the post-it, and held it up. The color drained from Julia's face. He left you alone? For 3 months, I said. Funding cut. No visits. No calls. Nothing. Ethan whispered. Dad said the hospital exaggerated. Julia covered her mouth. For the first time, the Golden children saw the truth, unfiltered, undeniable. I expected relief. Vindication. Maybe even triumph. But instead I just felt tired. So tired. Julia stepped closer. Noah, we didn't know. If we had, you would have still followed Dad, I said gently. Because that's who we were raised to be. The truth hurt her. Good. Because it was supposed to. But, I continued, you don't have to keep being that. She blinked. I turned to both of them. You want to work with me? Fine. But it happens on one condition. You stop protecting him and start protecting what's right. Ethan bristled. You think we can just turn on our father? I met his eyes. You don't have to turn on him. You just have to stop letting him turn you into him. The silence that followed cracked something open. Julia nodded first. Slow. Tearful. Real. Ethan didn't nod. But he didn't walk away either. That was enough, for now. Victor tapped his cane. Well, he said, it seems the next generation might have hope after all. Then he added, with a small smile. And the next step, Noah, is telling your father what happens next. My stomach tightened. Because I already knew. I wasn't done with him. Not yet. There was one more truth he needed to hear. One final consequence he had earned. The hope in his eyes collapsed so fast it was almost painful to watch. My father, Charles Crestwood, destroyer of rivals, devourer of boardrooms, legend in his own head, looked like someone had unplugged the power source that kept his ego running. A non-voting, he choked. You're sidelining me. No, I said calmly. I'm containing you. His face twisted. You think you can run this company without me? You think you understand what it takes? I didn't flinch. What it takes, I said, is empathy, accountability, and vision. 3 things you've treated like flaws. He pushed up from the chair so fast it rolled back. You're making a mistake. You're emotional, unhinged, you're letting old wounds cloud your judgment. I stepped closer. You abandoned your son in a hospital for months. If anyone here is unhinged, it's you. He looked away, because he had no defense for that. When your father died, I continued, he left safeguards in place because he didn't trust you. He knew eventually your ambition would overshadow your humanity. My father's jaw clenched. He didn't leave safeguards, he said bitterly. He left traps. No, I said. He left escape routes. For me. Silence stretched between us. Then he muttered, I should have never had children. There it was. The sentence that had hung between us for years, unspoken but always present. I let it settle, not reacting, not absorbing it like I used to. Maybe not, I said. But you did. And now you live with what you built. He stared at me, truly stared, like he was finally seeing the adult version of the child he'd spent years trying to break. You think this is justice? He whispered. You think cutting me out will fix anything? No, I said. But it will stop you from breaking any more. He sank back into his chair, exhausted by a fight he couldn't win. I gave him a moment. Then, there's one more thing, I said quietly. Effective today, HR will issue a restructuring announcement. You'll keep your office, your salary, your title. His head lifted. But you won't have power. No decisions. No authority. No control over me, Julia or Ethan. The hope fell again. You're leaving me to rot in here. No. I'm letting you stay, I said. Because exile would be too generous. You're going to watch what this company becomes without you. He closed his eyes. A shudder went through him, not fear, not grief. Recognition. I turned to leave. But behind me, his voice cracked. Noah, wait. I stopped. His throat tightened. I never thought you'd wake up. Those 8 words hit harder than anything else he'd said. Not because they were cruel, but because they were true. I didn't turn around. You should be grateful I did, I said softly. It gave you a chance to face consequences instead of memories. And then I left his office, walking out not as his son, but as the man he could never control again. The board spent the next week adjusting to the new hierarchy, meaning, adjusting to me. Some were cautious, some respectful, a few terrified, but all of them understood one thing clearly. The Crestwood era under Charles was over. I threw myself into work, real work. Not legacy polishing, not ego feeding, not empire fluffing. Actual rebuilding. We set up employee wellness programs my grandfather once envisioned and my father buried. We launched transparency audits. We raised wages in departments Dad didn't think were image relevant. For the first time, Crestwood Holdings felt like a company instead of a kingdom. And for the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. What I didn't expect was the reaction from the people I grew up thinking were statues in suits. 2 days into the changes, I stepped into the lobby and the receptionist, Marla, who'd worked here longer than I'd been alive, stood up. Mr. Crestwood, she said, voice unsteady. I just want to say, thank you. For everything you're doing. She cleared her throat. Your grandfather would be proud. It hit me harder than all the corporate signatures combined. Then the messages started. Emails from employees. Handwritten notes. A few tearful thank yous from departments my father never visited. They didn't see me as a fluke. Or a pity appointment. Or the forgotten son who got lucky. They saw me as a leader. But the biggest surprise came from my siblings. Julia showed up at my new office with coffee and a folder. I want to help, she said. Not because Dad told me to. Because you're doing something good here. Ethan followed with a tentative knock and a spreadsheet under his arm. I ran projections, he muttered. Your wage adjustments? They're sustainable. Long-term, even beneficial. He avoided my eyes. I wanted you to know that. Growth. Real, messy, uncomfortable growth. For the first time, we were acting like siblings instead of satellites orbiting our father's moods. And yet, even as the company began to find its new rhythm, one thing still lingered. My father. He hadn't spoken to me since that day in his office. He came and went silently, a ghost drifting through halls he no longer commanded. Employees no longer straightened when he walked past. Some didn't even look up. He wasn't feared. He wasn't respected. He was simply tolerated. I avoided him, not out of spite, just necessity. He needed time to adjust to being human. But life, as always, had its own timing. Because one evening, after everyone else had left, I found him standing alone in the boardroom. The same boardroom where everything changed. He didn't turn when I entered. "You've made quite a few changes," he said softly. "I have," I replied. A long pause. "They're good changes," he said. I stared at him, unable to hide the shock. He finally turned toward me. His face looked older than it had a month ago, creased, tired, stripped of self-importance. "For what it's worth," he said, voice uneven, "you're stronger than I ever gave you credit for." I didn't answer. "And he swallowed. "I don't expect forgiveness. But I do hope, eventually, you'll let me be part of the family again." Family? The word hovered between us, heavy and fragile. Finally I said, "That depends on who you decide to be." He nodded. "That's fair." And for the first time in my life. He didn't argue. He didn't lecture. He didn't posture. He just left quietly. The door clicked behind him. And I realized something. This wasn't the end of a war. It wasn't even a victory. It was the beginning of something entirely new. A company rebuilt. A family untangled. A legacy reclaimed. And me. No longer the afterthought. No longer the disappointment. No longer the boy left behind in a hospital bed. I was Noah Crestwood. And I finally stood where I was meant to stand. My father's quiet exit should have felt like closure, but life rarely wraps itself neatly. A week later, Malcolm knocked on my office door holding a slim envelope, cream paper, gold seal. Not corporate. Personal. "It's from your grandfather's estate," he said. I frowned. "We already processed everything." "Not this," Malcolm replied. "This was time-locked. Meant to be opened only after you took control." My pulse jumped. Inside was a single sheet of paper in my grandfather's handwriting, steady, deliberate, the same loops I remembered from the birthday cards he signed himself even when he could barely hold a pen. "Noah, if you're reading this, it means you survived something your father never would have understood, and you stepped into the role I always knew was yours. Remember, power isn't protection. People are. Choose them wisely. Build something better than what you inherited. And don't let the Crestwood name define you. Define it. Grandpa." I sat back in my chair, the words hitting harder than any contract or transfer of assets. Define it. Not inherit. Not preserve. Not obey. Define. I didn't hear Julia come in until she cleared her throat. "You okay?" I handed her the letter. She read it slowly, tears gathering before she wiped them away with her sleeve. "He saw you," she whispered. "Even when none of us did." For once, I didn't feel anger about that. Just clarity. Ethan joined us a minute later, awkward as ever. "We, ordered lunch. You want some?" It was such a normal question. Something siblings ask when the world isn't burning. I nodded. We ate together in my office, quiet, messy, real. Not the polished Crestwood image Dad forced on us for years. Just three people trying to relearn how to be a family. Later, when the building emptied and the city lights flickered across the windows, I stood alone in the boardroom, the same place I'd taken everything back. Except now, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like beginning. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Dad. I'm trying, Noah. I hope that counts for something." I stared at it for a long moment. Then typed back. "It does. But trying isn't the finish line. It's the start." I didn't know if he'd ever truly change. I didn't know if our relationship could be repaired. But I knew this. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I wasn't defined by him anymore. And for the first time, the Crestwood legacy wasn't a burden. It was a blank page. A foundation. Something I could shape into what it should have been all along. I turned off the lights, walked out, and locked the door behind me. Not as the forgotten son. As the man rewriting everything. Winter settled over the city the way winter always does, quiet, heavy, making everything look cleaner than it really is. It was late December when the next shift in my life arrived, quiet as a page turning. We were preparing year-end reports when Malcolm entered my office with a rare look of satisfaction. "You've done it," he said simply. "Done what?" He set a thick binder on my desk. "The board voted. Unanimously. They want you as permanent CEO." I stared at him. Permanent. Not interim. Not accidental heir. Not the kid who got lucky because his father made a catastrophic mistake. Permanent. "Are you sure they didn't hit the wrong button?" I asked. Malcolm actually laughed. "Noah, you've stabilized the company, boosted morale, repaired investor confidence, and implemented reforms they've begged for since your grandfather's death. You earned this." The words settled slowly, like snowflakes on a warm coat. I'd earned it. For the first time in the history of my family, I wasn't fighting to prove myself. I was myself. We held a formal meeting that afternoon. The whole room stood when I walked in, not stiff, grudging respect like they gave my father, but something warmer. Genuine support. Victor was there too, leaning on his cane, smiling proudly. When the vote passed, he approached me. "Your grandfather saw this possibility," he said. "But even he didn't imagine you'd rise this quickly." I breathed out. "Feels surreal." "It should," he said. "That's how you know you're doing the right thing. If power ever feels too natural, you're becoming Charles." That hit deep, and I nodded. But the moment that truly cemented everything came later that evening. I visited my father. Not in his office, he'd stopped using it. He preferred a smaller corner space now, quiet, away from the heart of the company he no longer commanded. He was sitting alone, reading old reports he no longer had authority to act on. A fallen king studying maps of a kingdom he didn't own. When he looked up, I expected bitterness, anger, denial. But he just sighed. "I heard," he said. "Congratulations." It was soft. Real. Unarmed. "Thank you," I replied. A long pause stretched between us. Finally, he closed the folder. "Noah, I don't know how to be what you want me to be. But I'm trying. Every day." I nodded. "Trying is enough for now." He looked down at his hands, steady for once. "You know," he said quietly, "your grandfather always said the future of Crestwood depended on which of my children inherited his heart." He looked up. I thought he meant ambition. He meant integrity. I said. "Yes," he whispered. He did. He didn't apologize. Not directly. Maybe one day he would. Maybe he wouldn't. But this moment, this honesty, was more than I ever thought I'd get from him. And that was enough. When I left the building that night, the city lights blinked back at me like 100 small affirmations. My life had changed. My family had changed. I had changed. Not because power corrupted me. Because responsibility shaped me. I wasn't the forgotten son anymore. I was the one rewriting the Crestwood story, line by line, decision by decision, brick by brick. And for the first time, I wasn't walking away from anything. I was walking towards something. Something real, something mine. Something worthy of the name I now carried with pride. Taking the elevator down that night, I finally understood what my grandfather meant. Legacy isn't what you inherit, it's what you rebuild. My father, quieter now, was trying in small, imperfect steps. My siblings stood beside me, not behind him. And as I stepped into the cold air outside Crestwood Tower, I felt it fully. This wasn't revenge. It was becoming. And the future was finally mine to write.